Hey, I'm Jusko from ProudMoney.com. How many credit cards should a person have? Is there a number that makes sense? Is there a point where you have too many credit cards? Is there a point where having a certain number of credit cards is going to hurt your credit score? All that good stuff we're going to talk about, but first I'm going to ask you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not already, and if you have already, I thank you for doing so. So what is the right amount of credit cards for a person to have? As you might expect, there isn't a hard and fast number here. There is not a right number of credit cards to have. In my opinion, you should have at least 2 credit cards, but where you go from there is going to depend on a lot of factors. Now, for most people watching this video, this question is probably going to be more about, is there some upper limit of credit cards where I should not be getting any more? But we should start at the lower end. Number 1, should you have credit cards at all? Number 2, if so, what is the minimum number that you should have? So for that first question, I would say yes, you should have at least 1 or 2 credit cards because you want to establish a credit history. Even if you don't like credit cards, establishing a credit history is a smart thing to do because eventually you're probably going to want an auto loan, you're probably going to want a mortgage or some other loans out there, installment loans that are going to be for larger amounts, and those lenders are going to want to see some sort of credit track record, and having a credit card or 2 in your past is the easiest way for them to look and see how you have handled credit. And having a credit card or 2 is also important because for many purchases, you would be better off using a credit card than you would be using a debit card or some other form of payment, because the credit card is going to give you more protection. When you make a purchase with a credit card, that's not money coming straight out of your wallet like it would be with a debit card. If something goes wrong when you make a purchase with a debit card, you buy something online or whatever, that money has gone out of your account, and now you have to go through the process of trying to get that money back into your account if you have a dispute with a merchant or there is some other issue. With a credit card, if something goes wrong, you have that credit card company in between. They sort of are on the hook for that money at that point, so they are going to be the ones that have some power over that merchant if something didn't show up on your doorstep when you purchased it, or you have some other conflict. So the money doesn't come straight out of your account with a credit card, where with a debit card it is going to. So that's another good reason to have credit. Even if you like to use debit for many purchases, having credit for some purchases is a smart move. That said, if you're going to get credit cards, you probably should have a minimum of 2 credit cards to make sure that you have a backup plan if something goes wrong with card number 1. And a lot of things can go wrong, whether a card number gets stolen and your bank shuts it down, or the bank looks at recent purchases and thinks there's some fraud for some reason, and all of a sudden they put a hold on your account. It is good to have a second card as a backup. Of those 2 cards, I would say that at least one of them should be a MasterCard or Visa. While American Express and Discover are widely accepted, MasterCard and Visa are almost always going to be accepted. So you are going to have those cases here and there where your American Express or your Discover might not be accepted, but MasterCard or Visa are going to work pretty much everywhere, especially if you go outside of the United States. That's a place where sometimes American Express or Discover may not be accepted. So make sure one of those 2 is a MasterCard or Visa. Other than that, in terms of having 2 cards, for many people, this is sort of an ideal number in terms of rewards. If they don't really care about having very many credit cards, you could easily get a reward scheme with 2 credit cards that you're happy with. Maybe you get yourself a flat cashback card like the Citi Double Cash or the Capital One Quicksilver, and then you augment that with a second card like the Chase Freedom Flex or the Discover It card, so that you have cards that between the 2 of them are going to give you decent rewards. And if you're not really a rewards chaser, you're going to get something back and that will make you happy, but you're not really spending all this time thinking too much about your rewards. Now, once you hit that 2 card minimum, you might want to sit tight, or you might want more cards, and how many more cards you could or should get from there is really up to you. There is no particular upper limit. However, there are a lot of considerations in terms of maybe your income, how much card spend you have, how long your credit history is, how many cards you are comfortable juggling, and a lot of other things. So let's look at some of those considerations. Now, as you think about moving beyond 2 credit cards, the number 1 consideration in my mind is how much are you putting on your credit cards overall in terms of spending in a year. If you are putting a lot on your cards, it makes sense to have more. If you're not putting a whole lot on your cards, it doesn't make sense to hold a lot of cards. So let's say you are someone that has $3,000 in purchases over the course of a year, and you decide you want to maximize to get rewards on your gas purchases and on your grocery purchases and on your restaurant purchases, and you get multiple cards to maximize all these categories. Well, even if you squeeze out an extra 1% overall on all the purchases that you make, if you're only making $3,000 of purchases over the course of a year, that's only going to be an extra $30. So you will have gotten yourself a lot of cards and spent a lot of time thinking about all your categories for not a whole lot of money in real dollars. But if you have a big spend on your cards every year, well then obviously it's going to make a whole lot more sense in real dollars to get more cards. That extra 1% or whatever you might be able to squeeze out of having more cards is going to mean a lot more real money in your pocket. And then another consideration when it comes to income is if you don't have a very high income, getting more and more cards might give you more in your wallet, but each one of those cards oftentimes is going to have a smaller and smaller credit line, because even if you can get yourself approved, those credit card companies are going to give you smaller credit lines because they don't like to see your overall available credit going much higher than your annual income. And so that is something that is going to be taken into consideration. At some point your credit lines are going to go down, and then at some point you're going to start getting rejected. So you also have to think about that when it comes to the number of cards that you want to hold or that you even believe you can get yourself approved for. The next consideration is how long is your credit history and how much are new cards going to hurt your credit score. Some people think there is sort of an upper limit in terms of the number of cards you can have before the banks will start to penalize you for having too many. But it's less so how many cards you have and more so how many cards you've gotten in a shorter, more recent period of time. So if you have a long, good credit history and you have 20 credit cards open over the course of this longer credit history, well, getting number 21 is not going to be a big deal. But if your credit history is newer, say 5 years or less, and you already have 10 cards that you have gotten in those 5 years, well then you are going to have taken some hits to your credit score. You're going to have hits from the credit inquiries when you applied, the hits from the new accounts. The average age of your accounts is going to be very low because they are so new, and that can hurt your credit score. Now that may not be a big deal to you because if you're not going to get an auto loan or a mortgage or anything else anytime soon, it doesn't necessarily matter what your credit score is as long as no one is checking it. But you should take this into consideration, and this is why in other videos I have said that especially early on in getting credit cards, you shouldn't get them more than once every 6 months on average, because you don't want to have so many credit cards packed into such a short period of time. Now, another consideration, especially if you are someone that is thinking about holding a lot of cards, is the fact that many of the major card issuers now have limits in terms of the number of cards that they will give to any one particular card holder, or they have limits in terms of whether they will approve you if you have gotten too many cards in the recent past. So Chase's 524 rule is one that is more well known, where if you have been approved for 5 cards from any issuer in the last 24 months, well, Chase is not going to approve you for that 6th card. And then many of the issuers also have limits in the number of cards that they will give to one card holder. So it might be 2, it might be 3, it might be 4, whatever the case might be. But in the past you didn't have to think about that. Now you do, because if there are certain cards that might come on the market later and you've thoughtlessly gotten yourself a lot of other cards in the past, well then you might not be able to get your hands on something that you want down the line. So it's not something where you have to worry so much about what the number is of cards you have overall, but you do kind of have to worry about what the number is that you have with certain issuers, especially if you think you're going to want other cards from that issuer potentially in the future. So if there's not necessarily an upper limit to how many cards you should hold, there probably is a place where you should become more thoughtful before you add any more new cards. So once you've sort of maximized the rewards that you are earning on an everyday basis, maybe it's time to take a step back and look for those bonus opportunities that come infrequently and that are sort of unpredictable. If you have gotten too many cards in too short of a time and you've gone after whatever bonus happens to show up in front of you, when the really good stuff comes along, you may miss out on it. So if you're someone that spends a lot on your cards, maybe that's bonuses that give you value in the $600,000, $800,000 range. If you're someone that doesn't spend as much, maybe you're looking for those $200 bonus opportunities on a $500 spend. And then of course there's also the retail side. We don't talk as much about store credit cards, but sometimes when you make big purchases, if you open up a card account, you're going to get a big discount on the front end, maybe a big 0% offer in order to finance those purchases. So the better shape that your credit history and credit score is in, the more you can take advantage of these opportunities that come your way. Now, I should say here, like I do in almost every other video, that all of this presumes that you pay off your card balances in full every month. If getting more credit cards means that you are taking on more debt and you are aware of the fact that having credit is not something that you are really all that good at, well then maybe you should keep your credit card numbers to that minimum of 2 or maybe even 0 if it is something that is really going to get you into trouble. So all of this is with the idea that you're paying everything off every month and you're really just trying to maximize what you're getting back from your credit cards. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video and you feel like I've been a little wishy-washy about answering the original question, which was, how many credit cards should a person have? Yes, the answer is there is no set number, but I think for most people the way it usually shakes out is that you might have those 2 sort of core cards that you use a lot, and then you would have 2 to 4 cards on top of that that regularly make their way out of your wallet. So maybe 4 to 6 cards is sort of that core number for most people, and then you might have some cards that you have gotten for the sign-up bonus or maybe a special retail discount offer, that sort of thing. But 4 to 6 I think is sort of the core number that the most number of people are probably using. So there is no right number of credit cards for a person to have, and there is no maximum number where you're suddenly going to get penalized necessarily from the banks unless you have a very short credit history. However, make sure that you are not getting credit cards and running up all kinds of debt, not using those cards to sort of finance a lifestyle that your income could not justify. That's it for this video. Questions, comments, put them in that comments section right there. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and as always, please go to proudmoney.com where we do credit card reviews, we talk personal finance, we talk deals, and all sorts of other fun stuff too. Thanks for watching. Bye.